audiotapes. That's very hard to do with videotapes. We need reform of the 209A restraining order laws, because some lawyers will tell you that 90% of those should not be granted. They're being, quote, given out like candy. I know you did a show on that, I've seen, and how that's being abused, but the restraining order is meant to be used as a defense against domestic violence. And 90% of them are actually being used as a sword instead of as a shield by people to gain favor in a divorce or to get even. And a lot of vindictive people go out and get this. I've sat in the court and I literally see, you know, the woman will say the word fear, the judge will grant it, and she's practically laughing. As soon as she turns around, as she leaves the courtroom, she's practically laughing and smiling at what she got, because she knows she's gaming the system. Now, of course, men could abuse that too, but it's much less common. You know, we've done some studies and we've figured out the statistics, and it's very difficult for a man to get a restraining order, even though, of course, a woman with a knife is just as dangerous as any man could ever be, and so the amount of damage done can be equal. So those are the first three things I'd like to see: shared parenting, more judicial accountability, and video in the courtrooms, and some feedback to eliminate judges. You know, we're running some people on the Governor's Council now because the approval of judges for a lifetime position is basically a rubber stamp, and that's a real problem. It's almost impossible to remove a Massachusetts judge.
So if we have judges having conflict of interest, we have lawyers having conflict of interest, we understand that there is the State Ethics Commission that is required to investigate these. And there's also rules of professional misconduct for lawyers as well. Why ain't these laws being enforced?
Well, it appears to me that these organizations are essentially sham organizations. I've followed many of the judicial complaints, and they'll sit on a complaint for a year, and we know for a fact they haven't contacted any of the witnesses, and then they'll send a letter saying they haven't found any cause to move forward. So it appears to me the Judicial Conduct Commission is essentially a sham to protect the judges. The Board of Bar Overseers of the lawyers, if a lawyer is stealing money and they have a smoking gun or some publicity, they will take action, but in general, the ethics of the lawyers can be pretty low before anything happens, and it requires some publicity before they're going to do something. And so there's just too much flexibility. And again, it's the foxes watching the henhouse. It's all judges and lawyers that are running the Judicial Oversight Committee. It's all judges and lawyers who are running the Board of Bar Overseers. So they let their peers, or their brothers, as they call, and sisters, as they call them in court, they're getting away with anything but murder in this system, because they're all going along to get along. There are many instances where lawyers are documented as doing, you know, very nasty things, and the lawyers that speak out are disbarred. These boards have actually created rules that prevent the lawyers from saying anything against the judicial system. So that's a violation of First Amendment free speech rights that prevents these problems from coming to light. So once again, it's self-dealing, it's conflict of interest. It's being run by what generates the most money and by the political and legal elite that control and make these decisions. And most people are completely unaware of all these conflicts that are happening in these back rooms and creating these problems.
So we know that if judges are investigating complaints of other judges, lawyers are investigating complaints of lawyers themselves. That's clearly a conflict of interest. What would it take to reform this whole entire industry?
Well, that's a big question, and I don't think there's any one simple thing. There's no magic bullet. There's probably a dozen, you know, various things that need to be done. I think these review boards need to have panels of common citizens on them, and people would argue they don't know enough to determine, but most of this stuff is common sense. Right. It doesn't require a lot of knowledge of the law to determine whether someone's breaking the judicial canons or the rules for lawyers or the law in itself. I mean, you just read the statute or you read the rule, and then you see what the behavior was and what the witnesses say. That's kind of a black and white comparison in most areas. Granted, there's sometimes this gray area, but most of it's pretty black and white. So an independent citizens body should probably be more than 50% of any of these panels. They will set up these committees and they'll be all lawyers. You shouldn't have any divorce lawyer able to be on a committee that determines child support. You know, last year they raised child support by up to 40%, when Massachusetts was already one of, some say, the highest child support in the nation already. It's just insane. Child support isn't child support. The panel refused to look at any data involving the cost of raising children. Now, who would do that? I mean, what else do you need to know that committee is essentially a sham? The lawyers want the child support to be as high as possible because that justifies the most billable hours in the fight, and it gets people back again and again and again in the system.
You know, it's interesting you bring the child support up, and I'd like to go into a little bit more discussion. If you have extra time, we'd love to do another show with you in regards to this particular topic. But getting back to Senator Cream, in Massachusetts, the people have the right to petition their legislators to remove a bad judge in the Commonwealth. And basically the last petition was in 2002 with Judge Lopez. How come your legislators are not bringing these petitions forward? Is there a particular rule that you need to do in order to get this forward?
Well, first, the mechanism is called a bill of address, and I believe it requires a majority of the legislature to pass it. So basically, you'd probably have to have video evidence of a judge behaving badly. Of course, there's no videos in the courtroom. So there's a lot of room for interpretation. But I think the flexibility around the rules, it's like the frog in the pot. When the temperature goes up slowly over decades, the frog gets roasted, it doesn't jump out. Same thing here. Each passing year, because of greater infiltration and control by lawyers of the whole legislative process and the whole legal system, what you have is a system that people get used to and accept as standard operating procedure, even though many of the things they're doing every day are blatantly illegal. They're throwing people in jail for having a heart attack because they fall behind on their child support. They're extorting money out of friends and family illegally because you can't send someone to jail for not having the money. That's a debtor's prison, and it's been outlawed. You can send someone to jail under contempt of court if they refuse to pay a lawful child support order and they have the money. But what they're doing is they're throwing people in jail expecting that the parents and everyone else will come up with that money. That's just a legalized form of extortion. So this has become common and accepted practice because they've eliminated all the checks and balances. There's no oversight by these committees. The appeal costs $10,000. Now in business we know only 1 in 11 customers that has a problem will complain, okay? Now what do you think that complaint rate would go to if you had to pay $10,000 to complain? That's what an appeal is. You pay a lawyer $10,000 or more to do an appeal, to go through that process. It takes a year, and guess what? Even if you win, it goes back to the same judge, who's now pissed because they've got a record of having been overturned on appeal. That's a system that's totally misdesigned. It doesn't work right. You can't require people who are being abused by the system to pay the system to abuse them, to pay them more in tens of thousands of dollars. That's an inherent flaw in the design of the system.
Especially where government works for the people. And you know, they're basically hurting the people they work for. We have another minute and a half left on the show. We're going to continue having a conversation with you, but we understand you have a website that can bring up all these issues. Can you tell us how people can
When I started this, I started capturing information, and I'm up to over 1,200 pages at the website fathersunite.org. which is information for people that are trapped in the system and being abused by it. We recommend people seek direct contact with the spouse, then go to mediation, and generally we recommend they don't use lawyers at all, because lawyers are designed and trained to essentially promote conflict. They make it into a win-lose. A divorce shouldn't be a win-lose. So www.fathersunite.org. The URL divorceracket.org will also get you the same place. You can download a flyer on CREAM, and you can search that site for over 1,200 pages of information on people to help them through these divorces.
Now, your flyer has real briefly, I'll state that your flyer has a picture of a garbage can with Senator Cream's picture on it. Is that an indication that you're looking to can her in this election before on the primaries?
Yeah, it's a play on the phrase to can Cream. We're looking to clean up Beacon Hill in general, and she's one of the worst examples of abuse of power and conflicts of interest in the system.
Well, I wish you luck in your effort to remove her and to hold government accountable to the people. You've been watching Behind the Scenes. I am your host, Hector Montalvo. Join us next time as we go behind the scenes to ask the tough questions, bring you their responses, and we let you decide. Thank you for watching.